Hello again. One of the things which I always find puzzling is the indisputable fact that diversity and inclusion, when used in the sense of ethnicity and race, always entails the promotion of black culture and the sight of black people elbowing their way to the front of the queue. This is a peculiarly unedifying sight. There are far more people in this country whose ancestry lies in the Indian subcontinent than there are black people. But they scarcely get a look in when it comes to featuring in advertisements or being sought after to star in films and television programmes in this country. It is only black people of African origin who are required. Of course, some of this might be that producers always have an eye on the American market these days, and since roughly 1 person in 6 in the United States is African American, it stands rather to reason that having black people in some drama that you are hoping to sell in the United States makes sense. For those of us, though, who live in a country where 96% of the people are not black, it can be a little irritating to see them being so heavily pushed forward and brandished in front of our faces. A fine example of this is to be seen in a new film called Rye Lane, which is set in South London and is about a love affair between two black people. Almost every character in the film is black, a fact which reviewers studiously avoid mentioning, presumably to show everybody how colourblind they are. They've watched the film and haven't even noticed that all the people in it are black. Incredibly, everybody seems to pretend they haven't noticed that the actors in the film aimed at the general public are largely restricted to just 4% of the population. In the description to this video, I give a link to the trailer for this film. Click on it and see what you make of it. With the sound turned down, it could be set in an American ghetto or even South Africa. This is simply an exaggerated version of what we see all the time on our television screens, of course. Since the actual figure for black people in Britain is 4%, viewers might like to ask themselves one or two questions. When last did they watch the advertisements during a break and find that only 4% of the people whom they saw were black? Have they watched a contemporary drama lately where 4% of the speaking parts were assigned to the black people? What about this? Since there are more Indians in this country than there are black people, when last did they see this reflected in advertisements or television programmes? When did you last see an advertisement which contained more Indians than it did black people? Can they remember watching television lately and seeing more Indians than black people presenting programmes or reading the news? The truth is that diversity in both Britain and the United States simply means black people, and that is a very odd state of affairs. That some of this is, as I suggested earlier, because a lot of output in the mass media now is aimed towards African Americans, is one possible explanation for what we see here in Britain. But there might be another reason for this. It could be combined with something else. The great majority of Indian people, and those who have grown up in this country in families of Indian heritage, ask nothing from anybody. Many of them end up in good universities and with careers in professions such as medicine and the law without asking for any special favours. It's almost a point of honour for them to do so. The situation with black people is very different. Special allowance is always being made for them, and efforts to encourage them are constantly made. Leave aside for a moment whether or not they need or indeed want such special treatment. The fact is that they do receive it. From that perspective, I suppose that it could be that giving black people acting jobs is both a good way of demonstrating that you have a strong policy on diversity and inclusion and can meet your quotas easily. Since this also makes your product more attractive to the American market, this is a win-win situation. Black people get well-paid jobs for which little in the way of higher education is required, leaving those of Indian heritage to take all the jobs as doctors and dentists. I suppose that this makes everybody happy, except, of course, those of us who groan at the sight of films like Rye Lane, that is.